Hey everyone, my name is Peter McCarron. I'm with the developer relations team here at LaunchDarkly, and today we're going to talk about custom contexts. Custom contexts are a new enhancement that we introduced at Trajectory last November, and in this video we're going to talk about exactly what they are, how they can benefit you as a user, and we'll do a quick walkthrough of the LaunchDarkly platform so you can see exactly what has changed. So before we dive into the LaunchDarkly platform, let's talk a little bit about what a custom context actually is. If you've seen some of our previous videos or you've been using LaunchDarkly, you may be familiar with a term called user targeting. This could be a case where I'm developing a new feature or I'm managing an application and I want to roll out changes to a small subset of users before they go to all of my end users. Some scenarios like this could be a designer who wants to see how something looks on a website before publishing it to prod, or maybe there are some beta testers who are testing a new capability within our platform that we don't want to make available to everybody until we know that the kinks have all been worked out. And what we've seen is that we're not always making these changes specifically to users. Sometimes we may want to do them based on geographic location. Maybe we want to do them on device type. Maybe we want to do them on the organization that they're a part of. And ultimately, using only a user object, we're a little bit restricted in that capability to be able to do these targeting on specific attributes that don't necessarily affix to a specific user. And that's why we wanted to introduce custom contexts. To give you kind of an example of what this might look like, maybe I'm a streaming media service and I want to be able to serve different types of media based on the licensing region or the plan tier that they're a part of. Or maybe we're part of a fast food chain and we have specific regional availability for certain foods. So we want to make sure that we're not serving menu items on our website in regions where they're not available. Let's go over some key definitions of terms that we're going to be using throughout the walkthrough. The first one is a context kind. The kind is the data object that we're passing from our application to LaunchDarkly, and then we're subsequently creating those targeting rules around. Each of those data objects can have whatever unique name that you want. So you could have things like organization, you could have things like store or region, really whatever definition that you want. The difference between this and our previous user objects is that we can have what's called a multi-kind context. And what that means is that I could have things like organization, device type, and user all associated with the same key, but they all have different attributes and they're all connected together. Whereas previously those would be 3 individual user objects that I'd have to create some custom rules in order to make sure that I can do whatever logic that I want. I mentioned the word attributes, and that's the next one. So attributes are descriptors that are tied to a context that I can then also create targeting rules around. So to give an example, let's say I had a user object for myself. My name is Peter, I'm located in Colorado, and I work for LaunchDarkly. My name, my organization, and my region could all be specific attributes that I could create targeting rules around. The last one is called a context instance. Context instances are mostly for those multi-kind objects that we talked about earlier. The reason is because those context kinds will be sharing a key, we'll want to see specific flag valuations for each of those individual context instances, even though they're all going to show up as one object because they're all sharing that same key. And with that, let's go ahead and dive into the platform. So here we are in LaunchDarkly, and you may have noticed a change already. We have dark mode. Super excited about that. Dark mode is now available for all of our LaunchDarkly users. So if you still prefer the light mode, that is there. But just a heads up, I wasn't inverting my screen or anything. Dark mode is an available feature, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about context today. So for my users who are familiar with the LaunchDarkly UI, you may notice that this new context tab has replaced users. So important note here, if you were using user targeting previously, we are going to make sure that that is backwards compatible. So what happened is that we're going to give you a default context kind called users, and it's going to import all that information in there for you. If your application is still sending user information to LaunchDarkly, they will be stored in that user context kind. So opening up our context menu, there's 2 tabs that you're going to see when you log in. There is the context tab, which is going to contain all of our instances. And then we have the kinds tab, which is going to contain all of our different kinds. The kinds here are going to show you whether or not they're in use. So basically, have they been called by a LaunchDarkly SDK? So for instance, I have these connected to my React SDK, so they are currently in use. The hidden means that if we don't want to use these contexts for targeting. So maybe there's some groupings that you want to do, but you don't want to necessarily do targeting rules around them. You can hide them here. I also have the ability to be able to create a kind. So if I said maybe I was going to have new kind, and then I could give this key to my developer developers. So when they pass information in, we want to make sure that we provide this key so that it gets captured into this specific context kind. So on the context instance screen, this is where we can start to do some really cool things and interact with how users or whatever objects are interacting with our application. So if I open up this context kind, this is for my pup Margot, who is an honorary dark launcher. We have the name, location, and organization as attributes. If you remember earlier, we talked about attributes being descriptors that we can pass in along with an object that are all saved underneath a context kind. So this kind is called development. The key for it is called Margot, and it has this information. The other cool thing on the screen is that we can see what SDKs this instance is interacting with. So one of the other pieces that we didn't talk about is you do have the capability to assess what are called instance versions. So maybe I have an instance that is accessing my application in multiple different ways. Maybe one is coming from an iOS client, and so it's interacting with that SDK, versus one that's accessing it from a web where it might be interacting with our React client SDK. So this allows you to be able to understand exactly how your users are doing it, as well as present different flag variations depending on which SDK they are accessing it from. Speaking of which, if we notice on the right here, you see the flag variations that are available from this SDK for this instance. So I have 4 flags in my environment. These are the variations that is currently being served, and here's the reason why. So what we haven't done is we haven't created any targeting rules for this context instance. And so because of that, the default rule is what's going to appear for each one of these. So let's go into a flag now and take a look at what happens when we go to create a targeting rule. So I'm in one of my flags. This is called background image, and we're in our targeting space. This menu should look familiar to you if you've used targeting previously. The thing that's changed is when you actually go to create the rules. So if I go to create the rules, one of the things I have the capability of, it's going to default to the users, and I could still do my same user addition that I've done previously, or I can add a specific context. This user one is going to default because you have to have at least one kind selected. If I select development, I can uncheck user. If I check user, I can uncheck development. Just one of them has to always be enabled if you're going to have an individual targeting rule on here. The other piece that is also really cool is I can create custom rules based on those attributes that I mentioned. So instead here, I could say that I have, if they're in the development kind and they have a location is one of whatever I have, and I currently have Denver, I could say that they are going to get the yellow background, and then we will review and save that. And now let's go back into our context screen and show what happens there. So if I go back into my context instances, we'll go back into Margot's instance because we know that she's located in Denver. This is going to load. And now you'll notice that this has changed to the yellow background that we put as our flag variation. You'll also notice that the evaluation reason has changed to a rule match, because what we're saying is there's a rule for why they're getting served this specific variation, but none of the other ones have changed. So this is all really great granular information that we have. There's one more cool thing let's walk through, and that's segments. You'll notice on the left here that we have segments. So this context is saying it's not part of any segments right now. We also only have the single instance like we mentioned previously. So going into my segments, you'll notice that we have the same capabilities. I could again use those individual targets if I wanted to highlight a specific user. So for instance, if I go to development here, I could say that I want to find my targets that are available. And I have Cody, Margot, and Peter. The other option is that I could set up those same rules again. So if I go back into development and I select my attribute, maybe it's organization this time, and we choose a value of LaunchDarkly, that they are part of this development one. We save our changes, and then we can go back into our context. Open up Margot, and you'll notice that Margot is now part of the development segment. So as you can see, this gives us a lot more flexibility and control over how we are going to specifically target users. All the information that we can pass from our application now gives us the ability to either make them a part of a segment or create individual targeting rules for, or be able to do different variations based on the instance type. I hope you have a great time playing around with context, and thanks for watching.